Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to tackle something that might catch you off guard. It's all about those times when thinking harder, really putting your brain to work can actually lead to, well, worse results.
Yeah, it's pretty counterintuitive,
Like,
right?
totally. And it's all inspired by this super interesting research paper called Mind Your Step by Step. Chain of thought can reduce performance on tasks where thinking makes humans worse.
Catchy title.
Right. So, you know how in AI, we've been using this technique called chain of thought prompting? We call it COT for short.
Basically, it's like asking an AI to show its work, like we
Yeah.
used to do in math class. Explain the reasoning behind the answer, not just give us the final result.
Exactly. And we always thought this made AI better, more accurate, more human-like in a way. But yes, T,
Bit of twist.
always a twist. This study actually found that COT can seriously backfire, and not just with AI. It messes with us humans, too.
It really challenges this assumption we often have, that more thinking equals better outcomes.
For sure. And the paper dives into three specific examples where both people and AI get totally tripped up by overthinking. We're talking about figuring out hidden patterns, like deciphering a secret code, recognizing faces, especially when they're blurry or distorted, and classifying things when there are, like, tricky exceptions to the rule.
Oh, I love those tricky exceptions.
Right. It's like you think you've figured out how to sort something, and then, bam, a platypus shows up.
The platypus, nature's ultimate curveball.
Totally. By the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand why this happens, but you'll also gain some insights to help you avoid these thinking traps in your own life.
Because let's be honest, we've all been there, right? Stuck in overthinking loops that get us nowhere.
Okay, so let's jump right into our first scenario, implicit statistical learning. This basically means our brains are amazing at picking up on patterns without us even realizing it.
Like it's happening in the background subconsciously.
Right. And to test this, researchers use something called artificial grammar.
Artificial grammar. Sounds intense.
It's not as scary as it sounds. Imagine, like, strings of letters that follow hidden rules. Like a secret code, but with letters instead of symbols.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So way back in 1977, these researchers, Reber and Lewis, they did this study where they showed people these letter strings and asked them to figure out which ones followed the grammar, the hidden rules.
So they had to figure out the code, basically.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. The people who really tried to consciously decipher the rules, like they were actively trying to crack the code, they actually did worse than those who just went with their gut feeling.
It's like our brains already know what's going on, and then we overthink it and mess everything up.
Totally. And get this. Researchers replicated this with AI. They used that code prompting we talked about, asking the AI to explain its reasoning.
And what happened? Did the AI outperform the humans?
Nope, it made the same mistake. The AI's accuracy actually plummeted when it was forced to explain its thinking.
Wow, so both humans and AI are susceptible to this overthinking trap. But why? Why does thinking harder sometimes backfire? It seems so counterintuitive.
Right, you'd think more effort would equal better results. But one idea is that overanalyzing actually disrupts our brain's natural pattern recognition abilities. It's like trying to listen to a quiet song with someone shouting in your ear. The noise drowns out the subtle signal.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to trust our gut feeling, especially when dealing with patterns and intuition.
Exactly. It's about knowing when to engage your analytical mind and when to let your subconscious take the lead. Have you ever noticed this in your own life? Those moments when overthinking just makes things worse? Let us know in the comments.
So we've seen how overthinking can really mess things up when we're trying to learn hidden patterns. Both humans and AI, we fall into the same trap. But what about a task that feels even more intuitive, more natural for us, like recognizing faces?
Yeah, you would think something we do all the time, every day, wouldn't be so easily thrown off by a little overthinking. But guess what? It can be. Even something as seemingly simple as recognizing faces can get messed up by, well, words.
This is where that concept of verbal overshadowing comes in. Sometimes putting something into words, especially something visual, can actually muddle our mental picture of it.
It's like when you try to describe someone's face to a sketch artist, right? You end up focusing on these general features like hair color or eye shape, but you totally miss those subtle little things, those nuances that really make their face unique.
Exactly. And there's this classic study from 1990 by Schooler and Inksler-Schooler. They showed people a face, and some had to describe it in detail while others didn't. Then, everyone had to pick that same face out of a lineup.
So they were testing whether putting a face into words affected how well people could remember it. What'd they find?
The results were pretty wild. The people who described the face, they were way worse at recognizing it later. Like, their accuracy plummeted from 64% down to just 38%, all because they tried to put it into words.
Whoa, that's a huge drop. It really shows you how powerful this verbal overshadowing effect can be. And of course, the researchers took it a step further. They wanted to see if AI would make the same mistake.
So they tested it with AI that can see images, right?
Yep. And they used that COT prompting, asking the AI to describe the face it saw. And guess what happened? The AI made the same mistake as the humans.
No way.
Yep, when it had to describe the face, its accuracy for recognizing it later went way down. All the AI models they tested showed this decrease.
So it's not just us. Both humans and AI, we get tripped up by overthinking these visual things. It's like the words create mental static, and that interferes with actually processing the image. Why does this happen, though? What is it about words that's so detrimental in this case?
It's a great question. One possibility is that language, words, they're just not very good at capturing those tiny details, those subtle things that make a face truly unique.
Right? It's like trying to describe the taste of chocolate. Words only get you so far. You really have to experience it to fully understand it. Same with faces, I guess.
Exactly. And when we force ourselves to describe a face, we end up focusing on those general features, like you said, hair color, eye shape. But we lose that overall impression, that gut feeling you get when you see someone. And that gut feeling, that's actually super important for recognizing someone accurately.
So by overthinking it, trying to analyze and describe a face, we might actually be losing the very information that helps us remember it later. Fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Makes you think twice about how much we rely on language, even when dealing with visual information. Okay, but let's shift gears for our final example of this overthinking trap. This time, it's all about classifying things, but with those pesky exceptions that always seem to pop up.
Oh yeah, the curveballs. Like when you think you've figured out the rule and then bam, something comes along and totally throws a wrench in your system.
Exactly. It's like you're playing one of those brain teaser games where you're trying to find the pattern, but there's always some hidden trick, some exception that throws you off.
Exactly. And to study this, researchers used a vehicle classification experiment. In this study from 2013, participants had to categorize vehicles as either warm climate or cold climate based on the features described.
Okay, so like if it has treads and heavy insulation, it's probably a cold climate vehicle, right?
Makes sense. But here's the catch. Some vehicles had features that contradicted the general pattern. So you might see treads, which screams cold climate, but then it also says made in Africa.
Ah, the plot thickens. That's where the overthinking trap comes in.
Exactly. The people who were asked to explain their reasoning out loud, to really think it through step by step, they took way longer to figure it out. They got so hung up on trying to find the perfect rule that they missed the obvious exceptions.
So focused on fitting everything into these neat categories that they couldn't adapt when the categories didn't quite work. Classic overthinking.
Classic case. And, they tested this with AI too, right? Same setup, same tricky vehicles.
Same results.
Pretty much. When using Cutfoti, the AI needed way more time to learn the classifications, like 4 times as many passes through the list. It got stuck on those exceptions too.
So it seems like explaining your reasoning, that process of trying to find the perfect rule, it can actually blind you to the important exceptions. You cling to these faulty assumptions instead of being flexible and changing your thinking.
You said it. But the question is, why do we fall into this trap? Why do we overthink it when sometimes it's better to just go with the flow?
Well, our brains love patterns.
Yeah.
We love simplifying things. It helps us make sense of the world. But sometimes that simplification goes too far and we end up overgeneralizing.
Right, we build this mental model based on a faulty foundation, and then it's hard to let go of those initial assumptions, even when we see evidence that contradicts them.
It's like we're building a house on sand. It looks fine at first, but it can't handle any real pressure. So what's the takeaway for our listeners? How do we avoid this trap in our own lives?
It's a balancing act, really. It's about finding that sweet spot between thinking things through and being open to new information, to exceptions.
So it's not about saying thinking is bad. It's more about recognizing that different types of thinking are better suited for different tasks.
Absolutely. It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
And as we've seen so far, that applies to both human and AI minds. But get ready for part 3, where we'll explore those fascinating cases where human and AI minds actually diverge in how susceptible they are to overthinking.
All right, welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into overthinking. We've seen how it can trip up both humans and AI, even in tasks that should be pretty straightforward.
Right, we've explored how trying to explain our reasoning, searching for those hard and fast rules can sometimes lead to worse outcomes than just going with our gut. But like we've been hinting at, things get even more interesting when we start looking at where human and AI minds diverge in terms of how susceptible they are to overthinking.
Right. It's not a simple case of AI always making the same mistakes as humans. Sometimes the way AI processes information actually protects it from those overthinking traps we fall into.
And this research paper we've been talking about highlights some really cool examples of this. So, for this last part, let's explore those differences, see what they might mean for the future of AI.
Sounds good. The first example we'll look at is about detecting logical inconsistencies, those moments when you hear two statements that just clash. Remember that example we mentioned earlier, all dogs have fur and my dog is hairless.
Yep, classic contradiction. And you mentioned a study where they found that if you ask people to explain why those contradictory statements might be true, they actually become less likely to recognize the logical inconsistency.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to force a square peg into a round hole, trying to make those statements work together. So caught up in creating a narrative that they miss the obvious conflict.
So they overthink it instead of recognizing it for what it is, a contradiction. But how did AI handle this?
This is where we see that key difference. Even with Coase prompting, the AI didn't show that same vulnerability. It actually struggled with the basic logic from the get-go.
It's like the AI was so focused on the individual words, the phrases, that it missed the overall meaning and the inherent contradiction. So its lack of nuance, its inability to grasp those subtleties of human language, actually protected it from overthinking in this case.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that AI's strengths and weaknesses, they can be pretty unexpected, and it raises questions about how AI might evolve as it becomes more sophisticated.
For sure. Will AI eventually develop that more nuanced understanding of language, of logic that makes it susceptible to those same cognitive biases we humans experience? Pretty mind-boggling.
Totally. Okay, let's move on to another example where we see this clear difference between human and AI thinking, a task involving spatial reasoning. Specifically, a cup tilting experiment.
Ooh, I love a good visual puzzle. Walk me through this one.
So picture this. You got two cups, one empty and one partially filled with water. The task is to estimate how much water needs to be added to the empty cup so that when both cups are tilted to the same angle, the water level reaches the rim of both cups simultaneously.
Okay, I'm visualizing it. Sounds tricky.
It can be. And research shows that humans, we benefit from either mentally visualizing the scenario or even physically acting it out.
Like we need to engage that physical intuition to solve the problem. We imagine ourselves tilting those cups or even try it out in real life to get a feel for the right answer.
Exactly. But AI, it doesn't have those embodied experiences, right? It can't physically manipulate objects or rely on that spatial intuition we have.
So when they tested this with AI using code to make it think through the problem step by step, did it get tripped up like the humans?
Nope. Its performance wasn't really affected by the Cote prompting. In this case, its lack of embodied experience, the fact that it doesn't live in the world like we do, prevented it from overthinking the problem in the same way.
It's amazing how these seemingly simple tasks can reveal such huge differences between human and AI cognition. Okay, for our final example, let's shift gears to a situation that tends to leave humans feeling overwhelmed, making complex decisions with tons of information to consider.
Like trying to choose an apartment, for instance. You get bombarded with all those details about location, amenities, price, pet policies. It can be a lot.
Oh yeah, been there. You start with the pro and con lists, trying to weigh all the factors, but then quickly descend into analysis paralysis. Too many trees, can't see the forest.
And research actually shows that feeling of being overwhelmed is more than just an anecdote. When people are forced to consciously think through all those factors when choosing an apartment, they make worse choices.
So trying to rationally analyze every detail actually backfired.
It did. But here's the interesting part. When those same people were given a distraction task after seeing all that info, forcing them to rely more on their gut, they made better choices.
It's like their subconscious mind was able to sift through all the noise and come up with a better decision.
Exactly. But what happened when they tested this scenario with AI? Did it fall into the same overthinking trap?
Well, given what we've seen so far, I'm guessing it didn't.
You got it.
Yeah.
AI has this greater capacity for memory, for information processing than we do. So even with all that apartment info, it didn't get bogged down in the same way.
Like it has this mental spreadsheet with all the data, Makes it easy to compare the options without getting overwhelmed.
And in this case, our prompting actually helped the AI's performance. It was able to consider all those factors systematically and make better choices.
So another key difference, AI's superior memory, that processing power, it makes it less vulnerable to overthinking in situations where we humans can get totally overwhelmed. It's a great example of how AI's strengths can work with our own cognitive abilities.
Definitely. And that's a really important takeaway from this whole deep dive. It's not about humans versus AI. It's about understanding the unique strengths and limitations of each.
Right. Recognizing those differences lets us use AI more effectively to help us make better decisions and solve problems.
As AI keeps evolving, these differences are going to become even more crucial to consider. We need to be mindful of how AI thinks if we want to use it responsibly and ethically.
So as we wrap up our exploration of overthinking, I want to leave you with this. Pay attention to your own thinking. Notice when you might be falling into that trap. Are you getting lost in the details, missing the big picture, second-guessing your intuition?
Being aware of those patterns, it can be really powerful. You can step back, rethink your approach, and pick the right thinking tool for the job.
And who knows, maybe by understanding our own cognitive quirks, we can help shape AI in a way that truly combines the best of both worlds.
Well, that's it for our deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring this fascinating world of thinking. It's complex, it's nuanced, but ultimately it's what makes us human.
And until next time, keep those minds curious and keep diving deep. We'll see you all soon.